everyone, this is Amanda Borchel-Dan.
And I'm Jessica Steinberg,
your host for Times Will Tell,
a weekly podcast from the Times of Israel. Hi, Times Will Tell listeners. It's Jessica Steinberg with you today. The recent overturning of the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling by the Supreme Court will probably remake how access to abortion looks in America, with nearly half of the states on track to outrightly ban or severely limit the procedure. A week later, after the overturning in Israel, the Knesset Labor, Welfare, and Health Committee approved new regulations aimed at making it easier for women to get an abortion. This was considered a key change in the decades-old regulations that includes drug-induced early-term abortions at local HMO clinics rather than only at hospitals, and allowing women to no longer have to face a review committee in person, instead undergoing it in a digitized application process. We're going to speak about all of this and other aspects of reproductive rights in Israel with Dr. Noya Rimalt. She is the founding co-director of Israel's Forum for Gender, Law, and Policy, and a University of Haifa faculty member who is currently in the States serving as a scholar in residence at Hadassah Brandeis Institute. Dr. Rimalt was central to the new regulations that were made. Dr. Rimalt, welcome to Times Will Tell.
Thank you.
So we'd really like to hear more about this reform, about the regulations. Is it a reform actually, or is it regulations? And of course, your role in the process. Please tell us.
Thank you very much. So as you said, Jessica, it's true that new regulations were approved by the Knesset committee, and these regulations made three minor procedural changes in the work of the committees. So the first change is that medical abortions can be performed now in community clinics. Women who are seeking to end pregnancy no longer need to go to a public hospital. They can go to their community clinic and do it there. Some intrusive and unnecessary questions were erased from the formal forms that women seeking abortion need to fill out. And lastly, you can apply for abortion online, but that doesn't mean that you don't need to come before a committee. This was missed. So you can apply online. So you don't need to come to the nearest public hospital to make the application, to request an abortion. You can apply online. The question whether the committee members will ask to see you or not is a discretionary matter. It is up to the committee members. Some committees don't meet with the women unless the women ask to be heard by committee members. But this is a discretionary matter that is up to the committee, and the new regulation made no difference in this context. It's only this online application.
What's the point of the committee?
Okay, so we need actually to start from the beginning, right? Because in order for us to understand what difference did these regulations make and to understand the general context and how significant it is, we really must get a sense, first of what Israel's abortion law looks like. So Israel abortion law is part of the criminal code. It is a law that was enacted in the 70s. It's a law that imposes a broad criminal ban on abortion, while granting a committee of 3 members consisting of 2 doctors and a social worker. The law gives this committee the discretion to approve a request for abortion based on one of 4 possible grounds. So the first possible ground for abortion is age-related. If the woman is under marriage age, which is 18 or over 40, the committee can give her permission for abortion. The second ground for abortion is related to personal circumstances. So if the pregnancy is out of wedlock, meaning if you are single, if you're not married, or if you committed adultery, so the pregnancy is not from your husband, if the pregnancy is the result of rape or incest, so these are the personal circumstances that set the basis for the second ground for abortion. Third ground for abortion is health-related. If there is a risk that continuation of the pregnancy might risk the life of the woman or her physical or mental health. And finally, the fourth ground for abortion relates to fetal abnormalities. So these are the four different grounds. So it means that there is no right to abortion on demand in Israel. You're totally, as a woman seeking to terminate an unwanted pregnancy, you're totally dependent on a public committee of three strangers. You have to file a request and to be granted permission in order to have an abortion, and the formal legal grounds for abortion are relatively narrow, right? There is no socioeconomic ground for abortion, which is the most common ground. Most women seek abortion because of socioeconomic consideration. So this is not part of the law in Israel. So the new regulation changed nothing with regard to the general framework of the law. These are only regulations. The law has not been changed. It is still the case that if you want to end an unwanted pregnancy as a woman, you have no control whatsoever over this decision. You're totally dependent on the public committee that decides your reproductive fate.
Now, Dr. Rimalt, how in practice, when women do decide to end an unwanted pregnancy and they go through this process, how common is it that requests are approved? And you've also actually written a blog for the Times of Israel about this. You said that women often lie about why they want an abortion in order to be able to end the pregnancy that they do not want. So if you could talk a little bit about that. How common is it? Do women lie a lot? And are abortions approved, even if women are lying about the circumstances?
So often women have no other choice but to lie. And the group of women who have the greatest problem with the law are married women. If you're a single woman, there is a formal legal ground for abortion, right? So if you're unmarried, single, the committee can grant you permission to abortion. But if you are married and you don't meet the age, criminal or health-related grounds for abortion that are relatively rare, right? I said it before. In most instances, women seek to end an unwanted pregnancy because of socioeconomic reasons. And this is the case not only in Israel, but around the globe, right? This is the reality. This is the global reality of women. So if you are a married woman and you don't meet the criminal age or health-related, and this is the case in most instances, so what can you do? You can just manipulate your way to legal abortion. How you can manipulate your way to legal abortion? For married women, there are two options. Either you come before the committee and you claim that you committed adultery, that the pregnancy is not from your husband, even if it's not the case. And the second option is to rely on the mental harm ground, presenting yourself as a woman who is mentally unstable. You need to bring a psychiatric evaluation to present it to the committee. So basically, you need to present yourself as bad or mad in order to get permission for abortion. And the pregnancy termination committees, as I said, these committees consist of 2 doctors and a social workers. These people know the field And they know that, if you don't give this woman permission to abortion, she will seek abortion anyhow, right? This is the history this is the reproductive history of women. So they would rather see women having safe abortion in public hospitals. And how can they check? You say you committed adultery. Can they really check it? And you pay the psychiatrist, and so they approve abortion. 99% of applications for abortions are approved by the committees. So what we have here, and I described it somewhere else, I called it, this is the paradox of a rightless access to abortion, right? No rights. A very humiliating and degrading process for many women who have to manipulate their way to legal abortion and really, a process that undermines their human dignity and everything else. But still, if you're willing to play the game, eventually you end up getting permission for abortion in a public hospital, a safe abortion that sometimes is even funded by the state.
We're going to take a quick break from my conversation with Dr. Noya Rimalt about reproductive rights in Israel. Hi, Times Will Tell listeners. We're glad you're with us for Times Will Tell, our weekly Times of Israel podcast. You should also check out our daily briefing, the 15-minute podcast dropped every Sunday through Thursday, in which we speak to our fellow Times of Israel reporters and correspondents, covering the very latest news and headlines. You can subscribe to the daily briefing wherever you find your podcasts. We're back with Dr. Noya Rimalt, the University of Haifa faculty member, a law professor who is also the founding co-director of Israel's Forum for Gender Law and Policy, speaking about her work for pushing forward reproductive rights in Israel in the wake of the recent overturning of the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling by the Supreme Court several weeks ago. Roe v. Wade, we're having the overturning of that in the States, and half of the United States, which is a huge number of people who are going to be affected by this. How long have you been working on trying to change the regulations in Israel? And as you're explaining it, making these small steps.
So let me start by saying that I'm working on abortion reform in Israel for more than a decade now. So I've been in this game for a long time. I must also tell you that on a personal note, I myself needed an abortion when I was a young married woman. I know exactly what, the process looks like. And once you experience it, you have a better understanding how desperate change is, right? How urgent it is for us to promote change. So I drafted a proposal for legislative reform in Israel in 2014. And really, the only way to change the situation is by abolishing the old law and legislating a new law that would recognize a woman's right to abortion on demand, at least in the first trimester. And that has been my goal for many, many years. And my proposal for legislative reform have been submitted to the Knesset in 2014, and then again and again and again and again, whenever a new Knesset have been elected. And as you know, many Knesset have been elected ever since. But I'm a realistic person, and I'm determined to make change. Even a small change, even small changes matter for women. So once I realized that legislative reform is almost impossible to promote within, the current political climate, and that has been the case for more than a decade now. So I've been starting to think about procedural changes. And as part of this effort, we also formed a coalition of numerous organizations and NGOs that are involved in reproductive rights. And we have been working together, pushing for these small reforms for more than a year. I myself, I met with top officials at the Ministry of Health, tried to explain there are some additional changes that are underway that I hope to be able to promote in the next couple of months. So, but it really has been a tremendous effort. And I congratulate the top officials in the Ministry of Health for working with us and for pushing this forward. But we need to remember that these are only procedural changes. They're definitely making the situation better. We started to work on it long before Dobbs was decided. And it was a coincidence that it has been approved a week after. It was only because the government, resigned, and we needed very quickly for the Knesset committee to approve this regulation before it ends its term at the end of June. So it was kind of coincident, but still symbolic. I think symbolically, it's very important that while the United States take us decades backwards to a dark time, symbolically it's important that Israel comes up with a different statement, even if it doesn't abolish, its problematic abortion law. Trying to make abortion more accessible to women is definitely something we should all be happy for.
What is the process that is holding back the changes that you've been trying to push for the last decade?
There are similar political developments in Israel. When you compare Israel to the United States, you can definitely see the correlations. And just as the religious right has gained tremendous political power in the United States, a similar process is occurring in Israel, right? So we see a political group that is not the majority, right, of the population, but because of certain political, characteristics of the system, this group has been able to gain much more, political power compared to its real size in the population. So, the 5 justices who decided Dobbs in the United States, they don't represent the American public, right? 2/3 of Americans support a woman's right to abortion. And then these 5 ultra-conservative justices write this decision that has nothing to do with public opinion. And the only reason these people have been appointed to the court is because the Republican Party lost any sense of accountability, right? Every political party should be first and foremost accountable to the public, should try to serve public interests. This is no longer the case, not in the United States, in Israel. Look what's going on in Israel now with a person, with Benjamin Netanyahu most probably returning to power, willing to do everything he can do, right, just to return to power, and he will sell the entire country just to regain his position as a prime minister. I think the same was true for Donald Trump, who appointed the 3 ultra-conservative and changing for decades now the Supreme Court. This is horrible how cynical politicians who don't have real public support, how to serve their own interests, how they're, changing the system entirely. So the same is true for Israel. I must say that I don't know if you saw, but there have been several campaigns, strong anti-abortion campaigns in Israel. My guess is that evangelical money is already pouring to Israel, giving money to all these so-called pro-life. They're actually anti-abortion people who are, advertising these horrible images of murdered babies and all this, really disinformation and all these lies that has nothing to do with the true facts of abortion. So unfortunately, that has been the case also in Israel, a coalition that depends on the votes of right-wing religious parties, and therefore these parties and these people can determine our fate. And whereas Israeli public opinion in Israel supports the right to abortion, and this is also the case in the United States, we are imprisoned by, these people. And unfortunately, under these political circumstances, this is where we are. In the United States, the Americans now got Dobbs, which is a horrible decision. And in Israel, unfortunately, I was not able for years now to promote what seems to be a more reasonable and really just more justifiable legal reform that would recognize a woman's right to abortion.
Okay, Dr. Rimalt, as we finish up here, what are your next steps going forward? You're not leaving this battle, clearly.
Never,
right.
As I said, I'm a feminist law professor, and one is not born a feminist. You become a feminist, right? Because your personal experiences are really shaping your consciousness. And I think the abortion I was seeking as a very young married woman, it was really the event that, shaped my my feminist consciousness. And this was the moment I understood how reproductive rights are central, so central to women's equal citizenship, right? This is really the cornerstone of everything. A society that allows forced pregnancy, a state that forces women to carry pregnancies to term. This is unheard of. Societies like this cannot be called societies who are really committed to gender equality. So my ultimate goal is to promote a legislative reform. But until then, there are many other procedural reform. The most important one is the psychiatric evaluation. This is not in the law. This is a directive that was issued by the Minister of Health in the 90s. And I'm working very, very hard to abolish this requirement. So there's a lot still to do at the administrative level. And as long as I'm here, I'm going to try to make it better for women seeking to terminate an unwanted pregnancy.
Dr. Rimalt, we thank you for all of your efforts, and we're going to keep on following your work and what you're doing and hoping that you get to the goals that you want to get to.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Rimalt. Listeners, we'll be back next week with another Times Will Tell. In the meantime, good listening.
Thanks so much for listening to Times Will Tell from the Times of Israel, and thanks to our producer, Gilad Brownstein.
Please subscribe wherever you find your podcasts and check out our daily briefing news show every Sunday through Thursday.
Like what you hear? Consider rating us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to spread the word.
Until next week.
Shalom.